What individual had the greatest influence on your wrestling career?
On my wrestling career, I mean, my parents had the most influence on my life and wrestling, but Glenn Goodman, really, along with Mark Prince, but Glenn was, took me from what I would say being a normal, good wrestler, and really helped me to achieve a different level. And frankly, he was my coach in one way, shape, or form through my college career, and then through the competition that I did even post college for like the senior level stuff. So that's a pretty easy one. So.
That's awesome. Who was your wrestling idol when you were growing up?
I looked at this question and I didn't have any. I started wrestling really late. So I started as a freshman. I was gonna take the world by storm in basketball, and thankfully for everybody I didn't. And so I'd love to say that there was John Smith or Golan or Dan Gable, but I didn't know anything about wrestling when I started, so I didn't have anybody growing up, unfortunately.
That's awesome. Yeah, and maybe it was someone you were chasing, right?
Sure.
What personal attributes or abilities contributed the most to your success?
I think when you start late, you have benefits and then you have negatives. So negatives, you don't have all the time that these kids have growing up and getting used to being on the mat and getting used to their body and understanding what they can do. But the positives are you don't get a lot of those bad habits. So I think I was fortunate to have good coaching close to when I started wrestling. And I think the biggest attribute I had was strategy. I think I stayed within my wheelhouse. I had a limited number of things that I did really well, and I tried to capitalize on them. And I think that helped me a lot through my career.
That's awesome. Okay, what is the most outstanding memory you have as a competitor in the sport of wrestling?
So, as a competitor, interestingly, as I'm sure everybody in here is going to say, I remember very few wins, but I remember every loss. But there was one in particular. I was ranked really high in the country my senior year in college, and I lost in the second round of NCAAs. And when you do that, you have to seek motivation to try and get back and keep winning in the consolation rounds. And I had one guy in particular from Michigan named Damian Logan who gave me a good old-fashioned ass beating earlier in the year in Vegas. And, he was kind of a little cocky about it and was saying some things on the mat that weren't particularly nice. And when you look for these motivational points, well, he came up in my bracket as a guy that I had to go in order to get to like the top 6 or whatever. You have to claw your way back each round. And he came out cocky because he'd given me a good beating earlier in the year. And I turned him and I pinned him, and I held his head up just a little bit longer and squeezed his head and popped it like a zit before I pinned him. And although I don't love all of the wins and I don't remember them, that was a particularly one because there was a little bit of, retribution there.
Yeah, so kind of a get back, right?
That's good.
All right, cool. Throughout your wrestling career, this might repeat the answer you just gave me.
Sure.
But it says, throughout your wrestling career, is there a single most memorable match or event?
So it's interesting. I looked at this question and I had to think back. There's so many events, and I wrestled for quite a long time and have a lot of interactions. But I think when I was able to become an All-American for Harvard my junior year, as I look back, I was the first one in 15 years. But it really set a trend for people doing it after me at Harvard. I went on to coach there, and so more than any individual accolades, I think I was happy to be that first domino that fell and allowed other people that went to Harvard, who's not known as a wrestling school, to know that they could compete on a Division I level and have success. And and we had a lot of success after that. So I'm very proud of that, starting that.
Yeah, and to believe
situation.
It's like the old story where the runner broke the time barrier and then everybody broke
Then everybody did it,
Yeah.
right out, right? 100%, so.
What made you get involved in wrestling?
Well, as I said, I was going to take the world by storm in basketball, and then a buddy from CCC, was the high school I went to, Jeff Paul, he just asked me, he was a junior, I was a freshman, he said, hey, do you want to go to this open wrestling practice over at Countryside with Dave Freyer and Bad Cat and all that stuff? I just said, sure. I went over there, and the rest was history. I started, I mean, I was horrible, but I started and I loved it, and that was it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so if you had the opportunity to start your career over again, is there anything you would change?
Man, I looked at that one too, and that's a tough one. The same domino effect that I think happened with Harvard wrestling happened in my life, and so every good thing, and successes that I've had have come out of somewhere in my history of wrestling. So I think if I were to change something, it might have a different domino effect, and I'm really happy with how things worked out. If I could change anything, I would have competed longer. So I think I stopped when I got into grad school. I stopped competing, and I just, I think I would have gone another Olympic cycle and tried to give it a run while I was in my prime. And so that's a regret, but there's so many positives that have blessed my life from the sport that it's hard to have any regrets.
Yeah, of course. I mean, at some point, life happens after wrestling, right?
It does.
In conclusion, what would you like for people to remember about you?
I think every wrestler, I want to be remembered as a pretty tough competitor. I was never going to be the most seasoned, or never have the most experience because I started late. But I was always a really tough kid and a tough guy for people. If they drew me in a tournament, they weren't going to be happy about it. But I think overall, I'd like people to remember me as an ambassador of the sport, and that I like to help anybody that came along my path grow in the sport.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sitting down with me, and congratulations.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.